Thank you for joining for this meeting. I'm going to begin by saying a little prayer. God, we lift up all those viewing this meeting. And this is about life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, about moving people from fear to faith and from ignorance to knowledge. And I pray that blessing upon everyone who views this, especially for residents of the state of Idaho. In Jesus' name, amen. Welcome, family, friends, and neighbors. Most of the time when I introduce myself to people, I say that I'm Tim Taylor, yet I don't do home improvements. That generally gets a laugh, but what I'm sharing in this presentation is no laughing matter. I'm here to educate and present the facts and perhaps motivate you to constructive action. This is for Idaho parents. And I include grandparents in this. I will attempt to show that our children are in jeopardy in the state of Idaho and that COVID-19 and our nefarious state government are connected. In the space of a few minutes, my goal is to establish this connection using common sense, a media clip, and source documents. There will be 4 elements to this presentation: a common sense look at COVID-19, the Idaho state government response to it, our sacred parent-child relationship as impacted by these aforementioned, and how we might respond as parents. Before I begin, a word of caution. If you have children present, you may not want them to be watching this meeting. Why? Because children need to be and feel secure. They watch parents, and if they become disturbed, they're concerned. You might want to explain after you have absorbed this presentation, or not at all. It's your option. I'm just trying to be considerate of little eyes and little ears. So let's begin. Our children, COVID-19, and the Idaho Constitution. A parental crisis in progress. Ayn Rand was a Russian-born and American writer and philosopher educated in Russia. She moved to the United States in 1926 and died in 1982. If some of you have difficulty absorbing this information, know this, that's okay. I'm here to educate and inspire people to peaceful and constructive and constitutional response. Anne said, you can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. My goal is to educate by drilling down to the most relevant facts for you as parents in as little as time as possible. I want to respect your time and attention. All elected officials must take an oath before assuming office. For the United States senators and representatives, their oath includes the affirmation that they defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. By the way, this little number 1 here, I've documented all the documents and links to this presentation, which I will be making available to, especially to Idaho residents by way of email. So, do we have domestic enemies? Historically, the answer is yes. Since the foundation of the United States down to this generation, everyone knows the name of Benedict Arnold. And the Rosenbergs were convicted of conspiracy and espionage. They had funneled atomic secrets to the Russians and were executed in 1953. This last person here, Azam, was an American-born convert to Islam, and he served Al-Qaeda and was killed in a drone attack in 2008. Most U.S. traders have at some time or at some point are in league with a foreign nation. For sure, the US has enemies, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that COVID-19 is man-made and that its origin was Wuhan, China. We would be naive indeed to believe that there are not enemies in our country and in our communities. For example, the president recently declared Antifa to be a domestic terrorist organization.
And what has happened, do you think we will conclude that elected officials went too far in shutting down society to the point of trampling Americans' fundamental constitutional rights?
I think given the uncertainty involved and the very fast pace of the infection, especially in certain areas, the original 30-day or so, and even maybe with some extensions, measures were appropriate. But I think that as time has gone by, the degree of impingement on fundamental liberties has never been anything like this in the United States. Nationally, forbidding people from engaging in their livelihood, telling them to stay home is just sort of a form of house arrest in many places.
Now we'll look at some Idaho mortality statistics provided by the Idaho Division of Public Health. The latest available statistics for our first table is 2018. For those invited to the meeting and others who might be viewing, I'll make all cited and source links and documents available by email request. This table shows the top 10 causes of death in Idaho in 2018. The 10th cause being influenza and pneumonia, basically the flu. For that year, it was 11.9 deaths per 100,000 of population. With the statistics of this table and the next, we'll do a little comparing of deaths by flu relative to those by COVID-19. Finally, we'll take a brief common sense look at COVID deaths internationally and compared to a select group of US states in our final slide on COVID-19. This is provided, the table you're looking at is provided by Idaho Division of Public Health, and it's how they're tracking and following COVID-19. What's relevant here is it shows the total deaths of 83. This number has gone up slightly in the last week, but not dramatically so. And they state here that 63 are confirmed COVID and 20 probable. And the death rate per 100,000 of population is 4.7 in the state of Idaho. Here I've listed the estimated population in 2018 at 1,750,000. That was so we can be as close in comparing apples to apples as we can going forward here. So here's our estimate, our little comparison, common sense comparison. The flu deaths in 2018 were 11.9. If we hold the population at 1,750,000, you multiply that times the rate, then, and that was all the same. In 2020, the deaths would be 209 by flu. Compared to COVID deaths, which we know is the rate as being 4.7 currently, but that's for just for this first 6 months. We got to multiply that times 2 to get 12 months. And the rate, if the rate was the same, population's the same, that'd be 165. So what does this comparison mean? It means that holding the population constant and using published rates of death for COVID-19, it would not supplant the death by flu, the 10th leading cause in the state of Idaho. How about a rhetorical question? Was an emergency or extreme emergency ever declared in any preceding year that you know of because of deaths by flu? Of course, either of these rates could change up or down this year, but thanks to our speedy government bureaucracy, we won't have the actual numbers until 2022. Also keep in mind that our COVID-19 stats are based on 20 probable COVID deaths. Here's some other common sense thoughts on COVID-19. Internationally, Japan has a population of 126 million. And they've recently concluded their COVID response with only 850 deaths. They had no lockdowns, no stay-at-home orders. Comparably, in the United States, we have 330 million people, and they're claiming 115,000 deaths. And through that, 42 states have had lockdowns, stay-home orders, or the like. Let's look at the states. Let's compare Idaho with the non-lockdown states. Idaho's numbers are shown here, 4.7 deaths per 100, which is the current rate. 8 other states have had more or less than us in terms of number of deaths. North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming have had fewer deaths, but they are much lower population even compared to us. But here's an interesting statistic. We had 4.7 with 1.8 million in population. Look at Utah. It has 3.2 million, almost twice the population, and yet its death rate is 4.0 per 100,000. Something is really weird and unusual when you have a state of that size with large metropolitan areas, no lockdowns, and yet they incurred fewer deaths per 100,000 than our state, which had all of this. And you can bet that their economy has not suffered the way we have. So we need to keep in mind these common sense comparisons and also looking at the death rates per 1,000 compared to other causes of death in our state. Next, we're going to look at the Idaho state constitution factor. As you will see in this, it's particularly important to the security of our children. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, that according to Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. Republican here is not referring to a political party, it's referring to a form of government called a republic, as opposed to a democracy. By the way, I'll be hosting a constitutional class for 6 weeks in July, which is free and it'll be online. Send me an email if you're interested. So, does Idaho have a constitutional republic? For the average citizen of Idaho, you might think we have, but technically, as of June 2020, we are not. This will become apparent as we discuss Governor Little's recent flurry of gubernatorial orders and proclamations. George Washington issued a somber warning on government that is applicable to us who live in Idaho today. He said, "Government is not reason. It is not eloquence. It is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Never for a moment should it be left to irresponsible action." Beginning with this slide, we're going to move quickly through this section on gubernatorial executive orders and proclamations in Idaho. In lieu of viewing all the relevant documents, I will, however, make links to all documents mentioned available by way of email request. In that regard, do your own due diligence, and you'll find that the Idaho Administrative Bulletin issued May 6, 2020, and it's available in a PDF download, is the crucial treasure trove of documents and information, but be forewarned, it's 146 pages in length. I will refer to it hereinafter as the bulletin. You're now looking at Governor Little's initial proclamation issued March 13, 2020, when the wheels of Idaho government first began to roll on COVID-19. This is also found in the bulletin. From here on, we'll be moving from the general to the specific, from government COVID-19 response to the impact on the sacred parent-child relationship and what were our rights with regard to our children under Idaho statute. Scary, I know. But why do you think that I did this? I've been a parent and I am a grandparent. Remember, Washington said government is a force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Here's the material points of this proclamation, which will be significant later. Number one, he based this proclamation on Idaho Code section 461008. You can follow my pointer as I note these things. He stated that as of this date, Idaho was in a state of emergency, right here. He stated that the nature of the emergency was COVID-19, right here. And he stated the emergency would continue for 30 days, right here, unless terminated, modified, or extended for 30-day increments. There's other relevant proclamations in Idaho Code. He issued a proclamation on March 25th, moving from a state of emergency to extreme emergency. And this covered the 30 days, the initial 30 days through April 24th. Then on April 22nd, a few days before that, he issues another proclamation and adds a 30-day extension to May 24th. Note here that these are things that he was allowed to do by statute under Title 46, Chapter 6, and Chapter 10. Lastly, the Idaho Code 67-422 requires that the legislature on the 90th day from the date of the inception of the attack automatically convene. The 90th day is June 23rd, a little over a week from now. So we finally arrived at the heart of a parental crisis in progress. The governor's proclamation on March 23rd, 2020 established a waiver, a temporary waiver of agency rules. The statement within that proclamation says, the appended list of state administrative rules are hereby suspended for the duration of the declared state of emergency. The appended list, by the way, is 4 pages long and in fine print and unsearchable with the PDF text. You have to find the specific rules that I'm going to share with you now, but they're in there. Number 1, child visitation arrangements. Keep in mind that these are suspended rules now. Parental notification of a child's location. Notification of changes in visitation rights. And finally, notification of the rights of the parents to appeal. Washington State recently posted an ad to hire workers to be involved in 4 child COVID quarantine centers that they were establishing. They also hired or arranged for over 1,300 COVID contact tracers. Washington State seems to lead the way in state intervention of families for the sake of COVID control. We do not want our state to follow Washington's lead, and yet if they did, and we were separated from our children by the state of Idaho, you can see where at the present time, given these rule suspensions, you might have no legal way to find out where your child was at. Remember, Washington said, George Washington, government is not reason, it is force. Never for a moment should it be left to irresponsible action. I've made 5 rule observations I want to share here. These rules were law, being a part of the Idaho Administrative Procedures Act. These rules are designed to protect parent-child rights when child safety is at issue. These rules are not for, nor even known about by the majority of parents in Idaho. These rules have nothing to do with an epidemic, even in the remotest sense. These rules are common among all states and are part and parcel for our bloated Idaho state bureaucracy. Our children, COVID-19, and the Idaho State Constitution conclusions. Statistically, I've shown that using a common sense comparison, the death rate for flu is historically 11.9 per 100,000 and is higher than COVID-19 at 4.7 by almost double. Further, the rates remain the same in 2020 for both, then COVID-19 will still not supplant flu as one of the top 10 causes of death in our state. Next, common sense tells me something is awry when 8 states who have not instituted some form of lockdown experience a disproportionate COVID death rate. In fact, Utah, which has doubled our population, has a lower COVID death rate than we do at 4.0 per 100,000. And you can bet their economy has not suffered the way ours has. We have looked at the Idaho Administrative Procedures Act and the Idaho Administrative Bulletin, which are just this iceberg tip when it comes to government bureaucracy. When COVID-19 hit, Governor Little quickly appealed to these agencies to help them, and they quickly filled the void. People who we do not know and certainly do not vote for. Governor Little has exercised his legal authority under the proper Idaho code sections that have been previously mentioned, but that authority expired on May 24th. And yet he and his bureaucrats like Dave Jeppeson, the Idaho Director of Health and Welfare, continue in an unmitigated fashion. We closely examined the rules that have been suspended by the governor's proclamation and are left wanting for a reasonable connection between the suspension and COVID-19. However, we may have an unthinkable as a parent, and that might be the only explanation. Perhaps what Washington State is doing is our clue. Just this past week, I received a report that a birth mother in Olympia was separated from her newborn by the state over this COVID issue. But many liberty-minded people came to her aid, and she was restored to her baby after 2 days. Of course, this was not in the mainstream news, though it is a fact. And in fact, it shouldn't be a news story at all. All this underscores the importance of we the people. Basically, we're where the buck stops. When our elected officials fail to honor their oath or are negligent in their official duties, whether they are a governor or a legislator, then we need to pick up the gauntlet. So I'm going to provide what I consider to be a parental proactive plan. I'm suggesting here that you be proactive there rather than reactive. When enough people respond in unity, change will take place for the better. So here's what you can do. Pressure your legislator. Contact them. As I mentioned, according to the code, they are required to respond to our current situation after 90 days, which is June 23rd. At the present time, I have contacted one of my legislators, or all 3 of them, but one of them responded, said he's going to be there. So write and call them. They do respond. Urge them to attend this special session. The link here will tell you who your legislators are and how they can be contacted. Governor Little is now out of bounds constitutionally. He needs to be recalled. As a minimum, you should sign a petition for his recall. I'm qualified to help you do that. And there are others trained as well. You can move to an more active state by joining our grassroots movement to recall the governor. Visit our website to see how you can help, and it's shown here. And while you're clicking around on the website, click on the button that says, "Why recall the governor?" It is provided It will provide you with a lengthy bullet point list of reasons, many more than I presented in this presentation, as to why he should be recalled. And lastly, I want to acknowledge a couple of very special and important people. One of them is my daughter, who helped me produce this short PowerPoint presentation. I pray that you're blessed by it. And then my wife, who has been very patient and helpful and understanding over the past 2 or 3 weeks that it took to put a lot of this information together. And I could go on and on. There's all kinds of people that I should be thanking, but I'm going to make this short and to the point. And I pray that this is beneficial for you. Thank you for being here.